Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining tonight. This is an exciting night because we're unveiling the latest cask acquisition by Irish Whiskey Society America from the Micil Distillery. So we're going to spend an hour or so tonight talking about the Micil Distillery, the cask that we've acquired. We're going to learn a lot about Poitin, or some of us maybe will learn. Some may already know quite a bit, but we're going to try some along the way. Talk about why I chose the ones I did, how they tie into our cask, and see where it goes from there. So before kind of going any further, why don't we kick it off? And I want to introduce via recorded video the founder of Micil. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Irish Whiskey Society America Micil Cask announcement event. I am here with Padraic O'Griallais, founder of Micil Distillery. Welcome, Padraic.
Thank you very much, Alan. Delighted to be here, and I'm actually thrilled that you've, as a society, have become a cast members. So welcome along to the journey. It's definitely going to be an exciting one, and you know, we've got some distinct whiskey laid down both for yourselves and for others, and you're going to be part of a very small but caring and I suppose exclusive community in Irish whiskey.
So that's Padraic, who, like you said, founded the Micil Distillery. They're in Salt Hill, Galway. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Let him tell about the distillery. Everyone see the video okay, I take it?
Yep.
Maybe before we go any further, I'll kick it off. Kind of, I like to do this. Before we sample the Poitin, I've got, let's call it a primer Irish whiskey. And I'm actually drinking one of Micil's brand offerings. This is the Inverin small batch release that they have. It's not available here in the States, but this is peated, as we'll talk about. Peat, everything they do has a little bit of peat in it. This is finished in PX sherry. So that's what I am drinking for whiskey. Kind of start off. Anybody drinking anything interesting as we kick off?
I'm doing the same, Alan.
Yeah, really. Great minds think alike.
Well, they use the Poitin octaves with it. That adds a really unique thing. It's one of my favorite new blends.
Yeah, no, it is very nice. At least we didn't, coordinate our outfits too. But anyone else starting with the whiskey?
Some Dingle, single cask Dingle from Folsom Wine and Spirits to start.
Oh, the Founding Fathers edition.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. How is that?
It's good. I'm enjoying it. It's definitely, you can tell it's Dingle. They have a distillery note that's throughout it, so it's a good.
Yep, definitely.
What they do.
Good. All right, well, sláinte, everyone. And so again, the way this is organized, we're going to talk for the first couple minutes about Micil. Then we'll talk about Poitin, how it's made. Let Padraic kind of explain the process and walk us through the first sample. Then we'll talk about our cask, and then we'll pivot back to the second Poitin sample and how that ties into our cask, and see where it goes from there. So that's kind of how things are organized.
It's a little bit of an interesting journey and a bit unusual, but just so that everyone's on the same page, I'm going to assume that people know nothing about our brand. So you can see the logo behind me. The name Micil is our great grandfather's first name. So my brother and I have been, we're the last, well, sorry, we're the current generation of distillers in our family. But we've been distilling for over 170 years, 6 generations in our family. As I said, Micil is our great grandfather's first name. You'll notice in our logo that there's a figure of a man, and despite popular misconception, it's not me. It's based on a photograph of our late grandfather Jimmy. So I learned from Jimmy, my brother learned from Jimmy. We were very fortunate that we grew up, besides our grandparents, and that's, I suppose, how we picked up the distillation craft.
Has anybody been to Micil?
Yep.
Have not, but I'll be there in August.
Very nice. How about Galway? I bet more people have probably been to Galway or the general area.
Yep. Yes, and lived in Salt Hill for a while, but that predated Micil by decades.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I walked by Micil, didn't know it was there.
It's hard to find right
Yes.
now.
Yeah, it's very it's kind of like a speakeasy distillery.
Yeah.
You have to know it's there and kind of have the secret password. But we'll talk at the end about their plans to build their new distillery about 20 minutes away, southwest from Salt Hill, kind of in the Connemara region, and where the family that he was just speaking of is actually from. So let's just one last piece on.
I decided in 2015 to cut a long story short, to quit my teaching career and to go about setting up Galway's first distillery in over 100 years. And then we began production in early 2016, and we've been going from strength to strength ever since. And it's been an incredible journey, going from the first distillery in Galway in over 100 years to being the first whiskey distillery in the year 2020, and just the evolution of the brand, and finally this year breaking into new markets. We'll touch on that later, I'm sure, Alan. But yeah, we're lucky with the tradition that we have, and fortunate that we have such a loyal and such a supportive community. Wherever we interact with people, we've been blessed with people who resonate and believe in us.
So Micil is, it's a family distillery, two brothers, and as he was saying, it goes back generations in the family. Not necessarily whiskey, poteen in the Connemara area. And that's what we're going to hear a lot about today. I don't know if anybody is a poteen drinker. I think a couple of you, from what I could tell from the notes, this is the first time you're trying it. Does anybody drink poteen before, or regularly for that matter?
Yeah, I've had like 4 or 5 different ones, but so kind of hard to get in the US though.
Yeah, for sure. And what we're going to hear about tonight too is there might be some misconceptions about it. I know myself from doing the full interview with Padraic, I learned quite a bit, because I think in some respects people think that it's simply just unaged whiskey. And it's not that at all. And there's certainly, there are rules about how it's made, who can make it. And it's made actually different than the way you make whiskey. So it's pretty interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen to Padraic tell us about the poteen that they make. If you haven't already, you can pour the first one, which is the Heritage Edition, which is the clear one. It should have an H on the little bottle, either on the side or on the bottom. And we'll let him kind of tell us about it. And then if you'd like, while we're listening, you can, nose it, sample it. And then on the other side, we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so that was our second Poitin to come to market, and this one is quite unique. The rest are unique as well, but this one has something extra special. So it encapsulates the wider Poitin tradition historically. I mean, if you were to sort of say, if you were to make a Poitin, what would make it most authentic? I would say you would probably have a mixed mash bill, i.e. not one cereal. You'd have a mix of two cereals, at least, if not more, perhaps. But certainly, and this is the great thing about the Poitin distillers, or the Fushke makers, or the whiskey makers of that era. They were incredibly resourceful, so they used what was available and what was seasonal. So this encapsulates that tradition. So it's 80% barley, it's 20% oats. And here's the other tradition: all the cereals for making Poitin would have been malted, and that was their understanding of making it. They didn't have science to sort of guide them. What they had was intuition. They had understanding from many generations and many hundreds of years of making this and experience. So 80% barley, 20% oats, both peated and both malted. And that's another thing. We actually still harvest our own peat, our own turn.
Anybody try it? What do you think? I love the nose on it to start.
Yeah, it's nearly got a balance. It's really mellow and sweet, and then you just get a nice kick of heat towards the end of it, which brings it up.
Yeah, so it's just to kind of reiterate, because I know I have the full bottle here, which you can't probably read, but this is known as the Heritage Edition. And as Pork was saying, it's 80% barley, 20% oats, both malted, and they're peated. So very much in the tradition of Connemara and Galway, back when, not necessarily when there was a lot of illegal distilling going on, but that would have been the tradition in that area of Ireland, as well as others, but certainly in the Galway, Connemara area. So really trying to bring back the history and the traditions of what the family was doing generations ago. I think the oats, gives it a nice creaminess. You get that little touch of peat. This is at 46% ABV, so it's been cut. It's not cask strength. Anyone?
For me, this was like I've had a few others, but this is the Poitin that made me want to try other Poitins. It's so good.
Yeah, and I won't spoil it because Pork explains it a lot better than I do. But when we circle back around to the second one, and he explains a little bit more about the difference between whiskey and Poitin and why this tastes the way it does. It's not, like I said before, it's not like new make, which is what I think a lot of people associate the word with. They just think it's, white whiskey, moonshine, that kind of thing, which, in some respects it is, but it's not simply just rough whiskey that hasn't been in wood yet, because there are some nuances to making it. We'll play another little clip while we continue to kind of sample this one.
Poitin, or early Fushke, as we would call it, it retains the flavors of what the distillate is made from. In other words, you should still be able to taste the cereal characteristics or the botanical characteristics in your spirit if it's authentically poitin, right? So that's one thing to bear in mind. And it is a protected category. I suppose, you know, there is a limit on how long you're allowed to leave poitin in a cask. We've done a cask series of puttings that are all actually sold out in our distillery at least, but we don't worry, we'll be doing more of them. They've been tremendously well received. So basically leaving putting, resting putting in a cask for up to 10 weeks, that's the legal limit. Now, obviously, Irish whiskey has to spend a minimum of 3 years in a wooden cask on the island of Ireland before it can legally be called Irish whiskey. So from that perspective, they are distinct and they are different. Whiskey is predominantly flavored by the cask, just broad brushstrokes here, whereas poitin is predominantly flavored by the spirit. So the spirit is always further ahead, we'll say, in terms of flavor profile versus the cask.
So that was one of the things that I learned is that there's a maximum of 10 weeks that it can be in wood. So if it were to go beyond 10 weeks, you can't call it poitin. So, and if anyone has poured their second one yet, you know, into a glass or can just see the inside the bottle, you can see the color. It's the same poitin we're drinking now that's only been in the cask for 10 weeks. And you can see the color it derived just from that short period.
So the first one was in no cask. Second one is cast up to 10 weeks.
Correct.
Alan, do you know, was it the 50 cask, the same size as the cask that you acquired is that what they use kind of as their standard?
Yep, and he'll talk a little bit about that. There's a history and tradition to using the smaller casks in Galway, Connemara. So, anyone else have any thoughts they want to share on this? Anyone not really like it?
I like the second one better, actually. The first one was good, great, but the second one,
it has to grow on me. I've never ever sipped anything like this before.
Yep. Well, that's kind of what part of the fun, right? Trying new stuff.
Exactly, and it's a different kind of peat than you would get from a peated Irish whiskey or a Scotch. It's more campfire ashy, if that makes sense.
Well, one thing to keep in mind, I can't remember if it's part of any of the video clips still to come, but so they're using their own peat from Connemara. So that's one reason that you may find the difference. This is very unique. So you're not going to find this peat used in anything else that you would have drank. Even Connemara Irish whiskey is not made using peat from Connemara.
Oh, interesting.
You know, so most Irish whiskeys that are peated are used with peat from Scotland. The exceptions, there are a couple of new exceptions. So Waterford is using some Irish peat, and in Donegal, I believe they're using a couple others. I think are using their own peat. Some that haven't released anything yet. But that is a big thing. So it's one of the things that kind of was a draw for me in choosing the cask, that they were using their own Irish peat in their mash bills.
For me, one of the interesting things that worked was like starting with Inverin and just the unique finish and taste of that comes from them using those Poitin octaves, and then go into this. And then it was more of a natural flow. Whereas I've had some other stuff, like the first time I tried it, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh, what is this?
Yep.
I was going to say the peat is also interesting because peat will be different depending on where it's from. So
Definitely.
The peat in Connemara will be different from the peat in Donegal, from Islay, or from anywhere else. So it's another differentiator between different spirits. You can take the same spirit, you could have them barley malted over different peats, they will taste different.
Definitely. Yeah, so hopefully if people are peat fans, this will be, what the products that they bring will be new to the peat fans. And if you're not a peat person or new to it, it'll kind of allow you to start off your peat journey maybe with Ireland peat. So we'll hear one last clip here about the Poitin. Then we're going to talk about our cask, and we're going to then circle back. We'll do the second Poitin in a few minutes.
The beginning, because both spirits are protected, you wouldn't actually be able to transition a Poitin into a whiskey, because as soon as you begin production of any spirit in an Irish distillery, if you're licensed to make Poitin and whiskey, so if you're fortunate enough like us to have licensing for both, you need to start from the get-go and know exactly what the outcome is going to be. You can't decide to age Poitin longer, because the minute you write it in on your records what it is, it's immediately written in as either, or recorded. You don't have to physically write it. It's recorded as Poitin or it's recorded as whiskey from the start. So you can't change your mind. Unfortunately, while it would be lovely to have that flexibility, it's not possible.
And it does require 2 separate licenses in Ireland. So
it does, because they're 2 separate geographical indicators. So within the European Union, both Irish whiskey and Irish Poitin have technical files and are protected under those laws. And the Department of Agriculture here in Ireland are the responsible authority for protecting both categories. But actually,
so, again, that was another thing that I learned in talking to them, that you actually need to have a separate license. So this isn't the kind of thing where any distillery out there can just decide to put out a Poitin, or, decide, oh, this barrel, we're going to cut it short at 9 weeks and make it Poitin. You can't do that. You actually have to be licensed. You have to designate it up front. So there are all kinds of rules, just like there are rules for whiskey. So I thought that was pretty interesting. There were only a few actually licensed Poitin makers at this point. And, I think if you want to be able to explore this more, I think Hank mentioned in the chat notes, but there is a bar in Dublin, 1661, that started out, and their main focus is kind of promoting Poitin, and they do a lot of cocktails featuring different Poitins, and you can try them straight. It's really kind of promoting that, and they were, arguably a little bit ahead of their, kind of got really on the ground floor on this one before some of the makers even were putting stuff out there.
Yeah, they have almost no Irish whiskey in that bar. It's fascinating, but they have some great Poitin. They have the whole Panger series and Crotcher that the guys up at Bailick did.
Yep.
I think I hope I don't butcher your name. Ken, you had some of the Bailick the last time we did a call, right? That I said go ahead and open.
Yeah, the Waylock is lovely. Their Crater, which is the Poitin, is absolutely fabulous. That they should have a new one out soon, but I'm looking.
Yeah, I walked in the bar 1661 and saw it. I'm like, oh, I'm in heaven.
Actually, so there are 3 categories. There's whiskey, there's Poitin, and then there's the cream liqueur is a 3rd category. So Micil is actually doing all 3. So I bring that up. I only mention that because, so in addition to whole series of Poitins that they have, they also have right now a couple of sourced Irish whiskeys, because they're still a couple of years away from, being able to release any whiskey that's distilled at Micil. But in the meantime, they also have a cream. But what's unique about their Irish cream is it's made with Poitin. So it's very good. So if you're traveling to Ireland, what I would recommend is when you're going through duty free, grab a bottle. That's the best way to probably get it. I almost forgot this last trip that I took. I had a big basket full of whiskey. And as I was going to the checkout, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. And I went over it because I couldn't, because it's not in the same place. So that's why it's not the kind of thing you'd see. It's kind of in a separate area with where all the Irish creams are. But it's very, very good. All right. So we'll talk more about Poitin in a few minutes. We're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about our new cask. So I think some of you can see it. This is actually the cask here. I think to the right of my screen. So it's got the Micil logo on it, which what we learned earlier, that is not pork. It's his great-grandfather, I think he said. But what we're going to do over the next few minutes, we're going to learn about basically what I chose for our cask. So we're going to talk about what the mash bill is, what the cask is. Here are some things about the type of casks they use, how long it's aged for. We'll talk about the cask program itself, and then we can kind of get into what the plans are for it, things like that. And then we'll ultimately circle back to the second Poitin, and there's a reason why we're doing it after we talk about our cask. So I'll let this start off.
So we have obviously 40% malt in the spirit. That's peated. It's the only peated component in the whiskey, with our own turf. And again, just a precursor, all the cereals are Irish grown. So 40% peated Irish malt, 35% barley, so unmalted, unpeated, 12% oats, and 8% wheat, 5% rye. So what the malt brings is this big, fruity, vivacious character. The barley brings this ripe barley character. It's spicy, it's oily, it's full of texture. And the oats then brings this vibrancy and this creaminess. The wheat brings a velvety texture and a wonderful layer of sweetness. And then the rye brings this wonderful layer of spicy texture, and it's quite boisterous as well as a cereal. So again, this was practiced in Galway City distilleries, and it really encapsulates that old urban whiskey tradition of Galway City with a lovely light layer of peat.
So if you didn't catch all that, it's a multi-grain mash bill. So it's peated, malted barley, unmalted barley, and then wheat, oats, and rye in smaller components. So 5 different components. The reason, and so the name of this is it's being referred to as a heritage pot still. And you can look at this 2 ways. One, this is traditional, how they would have made whiskey back in the day, where they would have kind of used what they had. But the reason we can't call this a single pot still at this present time is because the technical file, by law, you can't have more than 5% in other grains. So because we've got oat, wheat, and rye, making up more than 5%, it's got to be called a heritage pot still as opposed to a single pot still, which doesn't bother me at all. To be honest with you, so part of my goal, intention in whether it's a bottling or a cask that we're trying to do is differentiate, be unique, bring something different than what you can get, in the store, or even if you go to Ireland. So, right now we've got a single malt at Powers Court that's aging in bourbon cask. And that'll take a few more years, actually. That'll be still aging before this one's even done. Longer than this one, I should say. but I wanted to bring something unique. So I wanted a pot still. And I think you've seen other pot stills have come out with some oat component. But this one also has wheat and rye, which, no one's done a mash bill like this. And then you throw in that part of it has Irish peat. It pretty much is checking every possible box you could ask for. Not that was, wasn't like I came up with it, but it really does kind of check all the possible boxes of things that you might be looking for in a mash bill. Any questions on the liquid component? So, we obviously don't have any examples of that yet. The reason why we're doing this event now, in a perfect world, I would have done it last Friday because that was the 1-year anniversary of filling it. And I would have done it then, but probably Fridays are tough enough. I know people are busy in the summer, and that was 4th of July week. So I pushed it a week later. I didn't think anybody would really mind. But basically it's 1 year old. We're going to hear in a few minutes how long it'll age for before we can enjoy it.
Yeah, that was the question I put in the chat, but I guess you're getting to that.
Yeah, we're going to talk. So we're going to get into the cask, aging, all kinds of stuff. So we're kind of doing it in pieces. So I'll stop talking and let Padraic take over again.
It's a fantastic cask. It brings a great deal of sweetness, a great deal of fruitiness. It brings a lot of texture. So in oak, we typically get, particularly new oak, so virgin American oak typically has elevated levels of tannic acid. The chestnut brings gallic acid as well. And what that basically essentially translates to is additional texture, which is different from tannic acid. So tannic acid, for those of you who are into your wines or into your whiskeys, we all are familiar, I guess, with tannin and the kind of texture, the wonderful texture it brings. So gallic acid is there as well. So it's a distinct kind of texture. So really fruity, really sweet. A lot of spice coming from the wood there as well. So think of sweet spices. It's a fantastic cask. So and really distinct.
So following up on, I think the mash bill itself is pretty unique. But then I decided to get crazy and went chestnut, which is so this is a Virgin Chestnut cask. And it's going to bring quite a bit of flavor. I don't know I've had quite a few, and part of the reason I didn't just pick it out of the blue, I'm a big fan of chestnut cask finished whiskeys. I've had a few different ones. Has anybody had any chestnut finished whiskeys before?
Just from M&M.
Yeah, chilling.
Yeah. Yeah, what do you guys think of those?
Outstanding.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that wood. So what's going to be really unique about this whiskey? Well, the ones you would have had prior to this, I believe, would have been aged in oak and then transferred to a chestnut cask for finishing. This one is going to age exclusively in chestnut. So it's going to get a lot of flavor, and we're going to hear about the aging length, term, and size of the barrels. But because I think some people might say, well, the chestnut, could overpower the liquid, depending on, because this is a virgin oak, so it's gonna bring a lot of flavor quickly to the liquid. So for that reason, the maturity term is going to be shorter than than maybe what you'd expect. But I'll let, again, Padraic kind of talk about that.
Again, I actually haven't touched on the size of the casks. These are all quarter barrels. So there's 240 casks that we have put aside as, our whiskey cask program. And by the way, it's called Shielta Vickle, and Shielta is the beginnings. It is the first whiskey that we've laid down. It's the beginnings of our whiskey journey. It's the first time whiskey has been laid down in Galway in over 100 years. It's incredibly exciting, to be able to bring that tradition back to Galway, and to be able to represent the two great distilling traditions, which is Galway City and Connemara. The sort of 4-year aging period, just to explain the practicality around that. So in the wider world of whiskey wisdom, basically smaller casks mean a shorter aging period. So with the increased surface area of wood that the spirit is in contact with, it means that your spirit is mature more quickly, so to speak. And obviously that's a huge pro, because it means you'll have whiskey at approximately 4 years old from the time of laying the whiskey down. So it's a relatively short period of time. I mean, I'm looking at samples here that I pulled last week from the casks out in the warehouse. These are casks that belong to us, but it's really remarkable to see how quickly time flies. So some of these are, 1.5 years, nearly 2 years old. And it's not the earliest whiskey we've laid down, by the way, but actually our first whiskey we laid down in November 2020, if I'm not, November 2020. So in fact, we will have 3-year-old whiskey this autumn. So that's really exciting.
Okay.
We won't be releasing it, by the way, but I'm just mentioning that we'll have mature whiskey of our own. So that's the consideration there, that it's widely accepted that shorter periods for these smaller casks. And
so basically those two clips there, they're quarter barrels or 50 liter. So they're smaller. And as a result, you're going to, because you're going to have the liquid come in contact with the wood, that's a virgin chestnut. It's going to impart flavors quicker, and in theory, allow a shorter maturation period. So the cask program is a 4-year program, and we just passed the 1-year anniversary point. So actually should be able to, get stuff in 3 years. So, if everything went smoothly and bottled and shipped and all that, I would think we'd have it in time for Christmas, 2026. But
Nice.
we won't get too far ahead of ourselves, but it's not that long to wait for this. So this would come quicker actually than the Powers Court cask, because the earliest we can get that is 2029.
So you're saying if we behave ourselves very, very well for the next few years, Santa will bring us a bottle of this each?
Possibly. I don't know if Santa will, but maybe
USPS will.
yeah,
Santa,
somebody will.
Santa Allen.
But
What
so
was the year you said? Sorry, I had an emergency alert come over because of nearby wildfire.
no, so it's a 4-year program. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of the fill date last week, so we'll have it in 26.
Okay.
And I think, so it's a 4-year aging period, so some might say, well, that's short, that's a young whiskey. And I think, again, because of the combination of mash bill and the fact that it's a virgin chestnut, I think it's going to work, because I'd be more concerned, I think, if we went 5 or 6 years. I think it could get overpowered.
Yeah, and then it's a putt still, vice single malt. I know I've had the Waterford for 4 years, give it 3-4 years, and they seem a little young, but putt still might be a little better.
But the size of the cask makes it very different. And I'm actually finding, like, with the pot stills that have more of the heritage mash bills that they can't necessarily call it, young is not as much. Like if you've had some of the new Killowen and like Blackwater did the Dirt Grain series, all of that stuff, the youth is hidden by the mash bill.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. Definitely more so with pot still than single malt.
Yeah.
And even I was very skeptical of the smaller barrel, better in a short period of time. But even looking at the Boylock stuff, which is, you know, year and a half old, there is great stuff out there that is not 3 years old yet. So I think 4 years in this is going to be very good.
Yep. So that's the hope. So
What are we looking at for the cost for the bottle? We get that yet, or?
yeah. First thing first. I'm worried about putting on this event tonight. I'm not worried about bottles. I got to get to that point. Then we'll see where the world is. If inflation keeps going, maybe it'll be $300 a bottle. Who knows? Yeah, we gotta bottle it and get it over here somehow. So
Is sea or air freight?
yeah. So I'm not going to make any promises on what it'll cost, because as an example, any of you that picked up a bottle of the Irish American, our anniversary bottling, that was, you know, put in process before COVID. And by the time I got it here, the cost had tripled.
Oh,
I didn't triple the cost of the bottle, but the cost to me tripled. So, but that's just the way things go. Everybody suffered a little bit during COVID. So if that's the worst that we had, but so again, we'll cross that bridge as we get closer. You know, we'll do updates, and you know, I think people are encouraged to visit Micil. I will say one thing too, though, because so one of the things right now, the distillery is basically located. You mentioned up front, it's like a speakeasy distillery. It's in the back of a bar in Salt Hill, and Salt Hill is not a big area. It's like a block of a street right on the water.
No, I walked right there, right down, and probably passed it because I was going down to some pub down the street that was where an Ed Sheeran video was videoed, and I was just waiting for it to open. So I was back and forth up and down that street, and
you might have even been in the pub where it was.
Well, no, so
I ate a plate right across the street. I ate something right directly across the street from there.
Yeah, no, the bar on the corner is O'Connor's. That's the famous music pub. That's where the Galway Girl video was shot. Basically next door is another pub, and in the back of that pub is where Micil is, but you wouldn't know it because there's no signage on the street. So you kind of need to know that it's in the back of that bar. That's why I mentioned it's kind of like a speakeasy. So if you walk into the pub, you go all the way to the back, there's an entrance in the back of the pub, and you kind of go through the door, and it's like a whole new world. There's a distillery there. Now it's not big. It's you know, it's very nice, but that's where they're making all the whiskey now. Where I was going with all this was because of their current location, the casks are not housed there. So they're being moved to a separate warehouse for aging. So if you do go to Micil, you won't be able to see the cask, just so nobody's disappointed when they go. But even still, I strongly encourage everyone to go. They you know, they have two separate types of tours. One, you hear all about whiskey making, and they'll let you sample their sourced whiskeys. The other tour is one where they let you sample, they talk all about poteen making, and they let you try their gin. They make a gin and their poteen. So if you've got,
and then Alan, your third option is you tell them you're thinking about buying a cask, and you just hang out with Padraic. And I posted a picture of what I experienced, which was like sampling everything they had.
Yeah, I've been there in that nice little tasting room. But yeah, so I pretty much knew what I wanted, or at least what I thought I wanted. I like the idea of the heritage pots, because you know, they have other options. So they have 3 different mash recipes. You could do a single malt, I believe, a different pot still, or
It's a
all
standard pot still, except it's peated.
yeah, it's all peated, or you could do the heritage. So I was really only interested in the heritage just because I like the idea of it. And then the casks, they have a bunch of casks that you could choose. And so when you go to visit, you're thinking of, you know, acquiring one of these, they lay down all their different, you know, mash bills in all the different casks. So you've just got, like, think about all the iterations of things, and you're just trying things left and right. It's like, oh, here's the sherry cask, here's the port cask, here's the, and they're all excellent. And it's kind of like, for a minute there, I was kind of like, ugh, now I don't know what I want, because, you know, this is good, this is really good. So I walked out of there saying I'm going to sleep on it a little bit. You know, I knew I had made the decision to acquire one, but I wanted to sleep on which cask, just to make sure I really still wanted to go with the chestnut. Because it was a tough decision.
Yeah, it's 5 casks because it's bourbon, sherry, well, Oloroso, PX, chestnut, and then port.
Right.
Those are the 5 options they have.
And then the 3 different liquids.
And then 3 different, the 3 different liquids. They don't have any more port casks, is what they told me. I think I got the last one.
Okay. So yeah, so it's you know, it's really, those are the tough decisions in life that you like to have, I suppose. But we heard about the cask, and so there was a little bit of method to my madness here in terms of why I chose the poutines I did. So we don't have any whiskey, you know, to try that's specific to the cask that I chose. But they do have a poutine that they did in the chestnut cask from Casnola. So the second poutine that you got, the one that's very colored, that has an S on the bottom. This is the bottle. So what they did is they did, and they're continuing to do, some of their heritage poutine where they put it in wood for up to 10 weeks. And they've got, if you go on their website, you can order online and purchase it, and they'll send it to you. Comes very quickly, very good process. But basically the second poutine is the same as the first one, but it's been aged for 10 weeks in basically the cask that I got. It's not the exact same cask because obviously, but so we did a virgin cask. This is a similar chestnut cask from the same cooperage, but basically the same mash bill. So if you still have any of your first poutine, you can kind of maybe do a back and forth. And the whole idea of this was I wanted to be able to kind of give people an idea of what the chestnut cask, what that wood influence might do to the poutine. The other big difference is this one is at cask strength. It's at 59.5%. So let me, why don't you guys can kind of nose that, taste it if you haven't already. I'll let Padraic kind of tell us about this a little bit, and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Yeah. So same cooperage, different cask, of course, because it's a virgin cask. So this was a single cask edition. So it's basically our heritage poutine. So 80% barley, 20% oats. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Alan. It is all peated and all malted, and then it's been rested in a chestnut cask for up to 10 weeks. It does say
the bottle. This is bottle 80 of 90. I happen to have in my hand now, 54.5%.
54.5%. Well, I tell you what, folks, Alan must really like you if you got this stuff, because it's a pretty limited juice. It is sold out actually now. So he did well actually to get
Yeah.
his hands on it. So so
What's
well
the
done.
pronunciation of the
Oh, sorry, the word, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So we have our classic putting, we have our heritage putting, and of course, to encapsulate the cask rested tradition, we did what's known as the Siru edition. So I'll just pronounce that again, Siru.
Of course, it's sold out. It's
So
delicious.
what's interesting is, so when I was, the samples that I think that everybody got were from bottle 80. And I have bottle 79 here that I'm drinking from right now. And this actually has a higher higher ABV than the other bottle. So that's interesting. Because what I quoted during that was the other bottling. But, so this should give you an idea of what the chestnut kind of brings to the spirit.
I like it. If this is only 10 weeks, it's 4 years is going to bring it really good.
Yeah, so it definitely brings kind of a spice element.
But that's night and day from
Oh yeah.
the first to the second.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's cask strength, remember, too.
It's really
So
like Indian curry leaves or like very savory spices. It's really good.
Getting like tons and tons of clove.
Clove. Hell yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what I was thinking. When
Yeah, the other one they did like this, I put in the chat, is Amontillado rested.
Mhm.
And that's like, I love that. I'm drinking that now. It's 50%. I think it's still on their shop, but like, that's just awesome.
yeah, I think I grabbed the last few bottles of the chestnut, and I'm kind of glad I did it when I did. Yeah, I just grabbed them on spec just because I didn't want to get shut out. I didn't actually ask him. I probably got the last ones now that, as he says that, but he is going to do more. So, you know, they're a licensed poteen maker, so they're going to continue to do these kind of releases. They may only be in the distillery and online, but we'll see. So one of the other things that I didn't include in the video that we'll watch tonight, but it's in the full video. So I encourage all of you, if you have time, to go watch the full interview. I'll put it up on YouTube and the website. But we talk about some other things like bringing the products to America. So I think the plan right now is to be in the USA early next year. So that's the plan right now. They just have to work out some things, as you all I'm sure know, with the importers and distributors and all that stuff. But they are planning on bringing their stuff to the USA soon. So, but in the meantime, their online on their website works really well. I got, you know, inside of a week, I can't remember exactly now, but inside of a week, I had the bottles.
Yeah, if you like this, get the Amontillado. It's out of this world.
So let me, as we're kind of maybe continuing to.
Siru is cultivation, it's reclaiming, it's hard work, it's all of those things encapsulated. So for us, we wanted to reclaim, we wanted to bring back this tradition of using smaller casks for putting, and what we're going to be doing going forward is releasing special distillery editions of Siru putting, and you know, it's you know, it's been really well received, this Siru edition. So you know, I think you'll be blown away, A, by the spirit flavor, but B, then by what the cask actually brings to the spirit.
For those of you, I'll try to say the reason I wanted to play that. So because of, you know, their family history, tradition, where they are located in Galway, Connemara. It's, you know, where there's a lot of regions there that still predominantly speak Irish or Gaelic. So a lot of what they're going to be bringing to market will have the Gaelic spelling or words. So the Siru, and that's why I wanted him to say it, because if you look at the bottling, for most of us, you would never get Siru from the spelling.
Sutheru.
It's spelled Saothru.
It's true of most Irish words.
Oh, definitely. But
We
that's
get
why
it
I wanted him.
confused.
I wanted him to say it. So when he said it, I was like, all right, good, because I'm going to play this, because it's an easy word to pronounce, but you would never know to say that by reading the bottle. So it's known as Siru. If anyone's, you know, looking and saying, oh, I want to try one of the 10-week cask finished Poitins from Micil, it's not Saothru, it's Siru. So this is, again, a peated barley and oats mash bill, 10 weeks in chestnut. So again, hopefully the idea was to, you know, give you an idea of what the cask that we got can hopefully, you know, what some of the elements it'll bring. Obviously, it'll be aged, you know, a lot longer. But go ahead.
I can't get over the intensity of the aroma for being only 10 weeks in a cask. I'm floored by this.
Yeah, I think for that, I kind of knew that there are certain wood types that can, you know, be, I don't want to say tricky, you know, different to work with than traditional oak. So, and this is a virgin chestnut, so you know the color itself too is amazing. How much color in such a short time. But you know, one of the things too that I thought was pretty interesting, and I'll let Pork tell you, just when explaining how they make poteen different than how the process is slightly different than whiskey, and why, you know, I hate to use the cliche word, but why this is so smooth. There's a reason for that. And it's by design different than if you were making whiskey.
I'm putting my distiller cap back on here for a moment. You take 3 different cuts when you're making your final spirit: heads, hearts, and tails. So the heads is a portion of the spirit that comes off the still first, which is put aside. The hearts cut is the next spirit that comes off the still, and that's the good stuff. And then the tails is the latter cut, which is also separated from the hearts. And this is simply done by the distiller. So the distiller knows through sensory perception. So in other words, the distiller is nosing and tasting the spirit to know this is the point at which I take the hearts, and this is the point at which I end the hearts. So the hearts cut is quite narrow in Poitin, meaning your yield is lower, so you get less spirit. So it's a smoother spirit at the beginning. And then whiskey is actually an aggressive spirit. So it's a wider hearts cut, but it's meant to be aggressive. It is meant to have edges on it, because if you put too smooth of a whiskey into a cask at the very beginning, you'll end up with potentially bland whiskey at the end. And as we all know, that's a recipe for an uninteresting conversation and an uninteresting experience. So just to understand that this spirit here is smoother, we'll say, than you make. So just so you know. But again, once your whiskey is mature, it's going to be much more dominated, I guess, by the cask influence. But the spirit is spicier as well in the whiskey because of the different mash bills. So I think you love diving into sort of the difference that malted cereal brings versus unmalted cereal, and the different age ranges, etc. So anyway.
So just to kind of summarize, if you didn't catch the nuances there, because I found that very interesting. So again, it's not just simply, this is going to be whiskey. Oh, we'll bottle it and call it Poitin. You have to designate it up front. And the way you make the Poitin is, if you're licensed, I suppose, unlicensed, the mountains do whatever they want to do, but they're actually taking different cuts and a narrower cut of the hearts, so the whole idea of, not doing that for whiskey, so anybody who's had new make whiskey and they kind of associate that with Poitin thinks, oh, I don't like that because it's really rough, but there is a difference. So the new make, is intended to be rough for the very reason he was saying, because you don't want to put something that's totally drinkable like this Poitin is, because you'd end up after a number of years, with nothing special in your glass. So I thought that was very interesting. So that's the geeking out, getting the weeds of whiskey making portion of tonight.
I think we're going to see a blend of nearly how people label stuff, because Loch Mask released a new make spirit, which is very similar to Poitins I've tried. It's not rough. It's not like other new make I've tried. And I'm assuming that's just because maybe either they don't have a Poitin license or they don't want to differentiate when they make it, but they're deliberately making it to say, we will sell this as an unaged spirit.
Yeah, I don't know the exact reason, but that would be my guess, what you said, that they may not have a Poitin license. So that's why they're doing it that way. I guess there are maybe 5 that have the license, and I don't know I don't know exactly who they are. I know some that have put out some, but like Cologne, I'm not sure about, because like one of them that they put out was sourced from 2 others.
Well, that was a mixture of theirs
and Blackwater.
So they both distilled a Poitin and then they blended the batches together. But there's definitely more than 5 Poitin brands in Ireland.
Well, Glendalough does it. Tipperary does it. Is Mulroy Bay?
That's Bailoch.
That's Bailoch, yeah. But in the Crotcher, they do separate from that brand.
Correct. They both. But then there's Big Tree. Over here, there's Smuggling Nun, which is another Irish one that you can get. So there's a lot of different ones available.
Well, there's a lot more brands than there are.
Yeah.
Well, Smuggling Nun sounds like one I need to get.
For some reason, I always picture that as Strangling Nun when I heard about it first. It's fine. It's not going to blow your mind. It's available in the US, so the shipping is cheaper. But yeah, that was a good one. The story was a nun smuggled bottles of Poitin over to the US. So
they're making sales off the name alone.
Yes.
Hey, I'd buy it just for that name.
So let's do one last real brief clip from Pork on the Poitin that they do out in Galway.
Was with the fact that our Poitins are botanically flavored with the botanical called bog bean, and worth mentioning that the monks revered the bog bean from a medicinal perspective. So please don't take this as medical advice from Padraic. It's not. I'm just relaying the historical message that they had. So the bog bean was meant to be good for blood cleansing, digestive ailments, and even as an aphrodisiac. So go ahead and maybe put that one to the test if you.
Feeling really good right now. It might be because you're getting that bog bean botanical influence in their Poitin. So that's a common botanical out in the Galway region. So it's but that's just another interesting little fact about Poitin that I think I wasn't aware of. So in a way, it's has kind of a similarity to gin making in some respect, and they make a gin as well. So and if you were to visit, you can try their gin, try their cream liqueur. But
did you talk to them about the new distillery they're building at
yes.
all? Or?
Yes. So I saw some renderings and plans, and actually, let me see if I can get the name. I asked him the other day because I couldn't remember the name of the exact location. So basically, as he was telling us, the family is from Galway, Connemara, and actually, so where they're from is right near Spittle. So that's in Gaelic, AN, and then SPIDEAL, but then I think
On Spidal.
yeah, so the anglicized Spittle, I guess, is what so that is where they're going to be building their new distillery. And part of the interview, I did the full length one that'll be up, that I encourage you to check out when you have time. It's right where his grandfather or great grandfather's from, and I think it's where they actually might be buried, very close by. But the location, it's about 20 minutes southwest of Salt Hill, right on the water. So if you can kind of, you can picture kind of a map of Ireland, Galway. So it's, Galway's not, it's more inland, let's call it the city. So this is going west and south to the coast. And basically you'll be driving on the road and there's really nothing there. And then the distillery will be there, and you'll see it as you're driving up, and you'll see the water to your right, I think, and the distillery to your left, and they're going to basically have this unbelievable view of the water. So it just it looks like it'll be fabulous once they do that. So that's still probably, I forget now, I want to say it's 3 years away, probably. It's just everything takes a long time, all the planning stuff. I mean, they are moving forward, but it seems like everybody who's trying to do anything with the new distillery hits roadblocks, whether it be, nature, conservatives or whatever, political stuff. It's just not necessarily with nickel. I'm just saying I've seen it. It happened with Donegal. Delayed things up there. So yeah, it's just kind of the way it is, but they're moving forward. So that will hopefully, be up in a few years. I'm trying to think now. So yeah, it could be around the time the cask is ready. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how that all works out. Maybe that could ultimately be go to the new distillery as part of the, bottling of the whiskey kind of thing. But again, I'm not going to get too far ahead of ourselves on that one.
It was by design. We know it. It was all planned out.
Yeah. But yeah, so let me, so I have one last kind of concluding clip from Padraic, and then I'll.
So incredibly limited. We won't be on the records. We won't be doing another cask offering out of our Galway City distillery, just so you know. So again, this is a tiny quantity of whiskey, and done very carefully, very thoughtfully from a historical perspective and from a whiskey making perspective. We've taken an awful lot of care and attention to detail to make it right.
All right. So that is some of the highlights that I want to just bring tonight for the event. But we go into US, plans for the USA distribution and some more things about what they do, family history, Galway itself, some chit chat. So I edited it down for you guys to kind of keep this moving along. But did anybody like the first heritage poutine better than the chestnut Ciru version? Just curious.
They're very different.
I did.
you like the unwooded one.
Yeah, I think that I think I need a little more age on the one in the cask. The char is just coming out. It's almost overpowering, like the char. The clove is really good, but the char just kind of lingers. And if you put your nose in it and you're really going into it for like a while, I was just sitting there just smelling an empty glass. It's just kind of overpowering. I think I prefer that like chocolate nuttiness of the first one a little more, but I like the ABV of the second one. So there will be some sort of balance once it ages.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because again, the whole idea, as he was talking about earlier, is that with the Poitin, it's supposed to be more spirit forward. So you want to get the cereal grains and out of it. So when you put it in the wood, you're kind of then bridging over to more whiskey kind of thing. But so the second one is kind of a hybrid or whatever you want to call it, trying to give you a taste of both worlds maybe. But so that was kind of the idea of it. Give one at the lower strength, one at the higher strength, one in wood, one without. Try to, it's not the exact mash bill of what's going in our cask, but these were kind of the closest things I could come up with to give you guys an idea of what is in our cask now, and maybe give you a little bit of an idea what it might be like in a few years. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed themselves tonight, learning about Micil Distillery, Poitin making, getting a chance to sample a few, and want to thank everybody who participated and attended to help the Irish Whiskey Society of America celebrate our newest cask acquisition from Micil Distillery. It'll only be 3 more years to wait before hopefully we can enjoy a really unique and excellent new Irish whiskey. So thanks again. Have a good night.